Welcome to Movie Quotes and Recaps. Today I am going to tell you the story of the 2015 movie, The Martian. At the landing site of the shuttle Ares 3, Acidalia Planitia, Mars, the crew of the Hermes, including Commander Melissa Lewis, botanist Mark Watney, IT guru Beth Johansson, flight surgeon Chris Beck, pilot Rick Martinez, and navigator and chemist Alex Vogel, are gathering samples when suddenly an updated storm warning appears, 1,200 kilometers in diameter, with an estimated force of 8,600 newtons, enough to tip their ascent vehicle. Commander Lewis gives orders to abort the mission. When they are going back to the MAV, Mark Watney is hit by debris, and a warning of a suit breach is detected. Martinez is barely able to keep the MAV from tipping over. Unable to make radio contact with Watney and the MAV on its limit, Commander Lewis decides to launch without him, thinking he is already dead. Back on Earth, NASA Director Teddy Sanders holds a press conference to announce that while the Hermes crew succeeded in leaving Mars, Mark Watney was lost, and he is declared dead. Watney wakes up on Mars on Sol 19 or Mission Day 19, after the storm has passed. His oxygen is depleting rapidly, so he makes his way back to the hub station. He's been impaled by part of an antenna. In a painful procedure, Watney pulls the antenna out, uses forceps to fish out a piece that broke off in the wound, and then staples it. Later, he sits down to make a video log, where he outlines the situation. He's alive because the antenna and his blood managed to seal the breach in his suit, and he can't contact Earth or Hermes, even if he made contact with NASA. It will take 4 years until a manned mission can reach him. On Sol 20, Watney stays inside, hoping the hub will not be breached by the storm, and later tells himself that he is not going to die. The next day, Sol 21. He went to the kitchen and did an inventory of what food he had left. Realizing he almost has only a year's worth of food, or a little longer if he rations, Watney determines that he has to grow 3 years' worth of food on a planet where nothing grows. Luckily for him, he's a botanist and devises a plan to grow potatoes. Sol 22, he cleaned the solar panel that's been covered in dust by the storm. Then he brings Mars soil inside the hub and starts making his garden. Using the crew's biowaste he collected to make fertilizer, he plants the potatoes, but soon realized that he doesn't have enough water to cover the entire 126 square meters of soil. His first attempt to manufacture water from leftover rocket fuel failed, causing a moderate explosion. But he succeeded in his next attempt, and as days passed by on Mars, he had enough water for the potatoes, and in Sol 54, he saw a potato leaf spouting. Meanwhile, at NASA in Houston, Texas, Sanders gave a speech at the memorial service for Mark Watney, where he spoke about Watney's dedication to exploration. Mars mission director Vincent Kapoor talks to Sanders about getting satellite time to locate Watney's body. Sanders refuses on the grounds that the satellite feeds are public and that broadcasting pictures of Watney's corpse would be a political and budgetary disaster for NASA. Later, engineer Mindy Park discovers evidence of activity in satellite photos of the Ares 3 site. In low-resolution images apparently taken in a routine flyby, the solar panels have been cleaned and the rover has moved. They bring in Sanders and Director of Media Relations Annie Montrose to show them that Watney is still alive. 2 days later, Sanders announces in the press conference that Watney is alive. On Mars Day 70, with still no communication from NASA, Watney starts thinking about the long term since the next mission for NASA's Ares 4 is supposed to land in the Schiaparelli crater, 3,200 kilometers away. So in 4 years, when the next Ares crew arrives, he must be there. Watney starts a dry run using a rover that he upgrades to increase its battery life and later finds that if he uses the heater, it will burn the battery in half a day. He went back to the hub, and Watney dug up the radioisotope thermoelectric generator and put it inside the rover to keep him warm. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Watney has no idea that NASA already knows that he's alive and is monitoring all his movements. And they plan a pre-supply mission to Mars in 3 months. Mitch Henderson blurted out that they had to inform the crew, but Sanders decided against it until they had a real rescue plan. Back on Mars, Watney starts harvesting his natural organic Martian-grown potatoes and planting again. But realized that anything he does is useless unless he gets in contact with NASA. Later, while looking at the map, Watney noticed a red mark, and the next day he traveled to the locations and found the Pathfinder roving probe. Back on Earth, Mindy and Vincent notice that Watney has left the hub again, and later Vincent plots on the Mars map where Watney will be going and remembers the last Pathfinder's location. Vincent immediately traveled to the JPL laboratory in California. He met the team that manages the Pathfinder in 1997. On Mars, Watney dug the device, brought it back to the hub, and started the Pathfinder using a new battery. Back on Earth, Vincent and the team at JPL received the signal from the Pathfinder on Mars, and finally, they have a communication system, but it's limited only to a still-frame camera. Watney devised a strategy using a hexadecimal unit. Using that method, NASA was able to give instructions to Watney on how to hack the rover so that it could talk to Pathfinder. They start communicating like a text message. Vincent informs him that they have been watching him since Sol 54, and in the meantime, a supply mission is being put up to keep him fed until Ares 4 arrives. Everybody was glad and happy at NASA when they read his reply. But the mood changes when Watney asks about the crew and their reactions when they found out he was alive. As soon as Vincent tells the truth that they have not told the crew of Hermes yet, Watney gets mad. Later, Mitch tells Sander that it's time to tell the crew of Hermes that Watney is alive. For months after Hermes departs from Mars, they receive a video message directly from Mitch informing them that Watney is alive and healthy and wanting to tell them that it's not their fault. Later, back on Mars, Watney is now full of hopes and even brags about his crops, saying he is the greatest botanist and has even colonized Mars. Later, an accident happened. A loss in pressure in the hub caused an explosion, killing all the crops. For weeks later, NASA and JPL work overtime and quickly launch a probe to resupply Watney. To make their launch window, they bypass routine inspections, and moments after launching, the probe's trajectory shifts severely, and it swerves off course and explodes. Meanwhile in China, two directors from the Chinese National Space Administration, Zhu Tao and Guo Ming, witness the explosion and discuss helping NASA by offering their classified booster rocket technology to launch a supply craft. Guo Ming asks Zhu Tao why NASA has not already asked for their help, and Zhu Tao reminds him that it is a top-secret program that NASA would not have any knowledge of. They decide that, in the interests of international scientific cooperation, they will contact NASA and offer their booster rocket. Meanwhile, in Pleiades' NASA Advanced Supercomputer, Rich Purnell is running a calculation on how to get the Hermes back to Mars faster. Later, Purnell explained to Vincent and Sanders that Hermes would fly by Earth, get resupplies from the Taiyangtian, and go to Mars. Then Watney will use the MAV from the Ares 4 landing site to intercept the Hermes. But Sanders goes against the plan. Later, Alex Vogel received an ASCII text file that contained the plot maneuvers from Earth to Mars. The crew unanimously agreed to do the maneuver regardless of the consequences they might face for going against NASA's decision. The Hermes get the supplies they need and go immediately back to Mars. 7 months later, Watney is at 461 days alone on Mars. He begins his travel to the Ares 4 location, and after a long journey, he reaches the Ares location in Sol 538, which means he traveled for 77 days. In preparation, he removes everything that is heavy, including the window and the top cover of the MAV, and replaces them with a tarp. At Sol 560, the crew of Hermes rehearses their intercept plan. The day has finally come. Sol 561, Watney left a message inside the rover and walked towards the MAV. While back on Earth, NASA and the rest of the world watch with anticipation. In the Hermes, Commander Lewis does the pre-flight check, while in the meantime, Watney is anxious to get back to the Hermes. Martinez, flying the MAV by remote control, launches Watney into orbit. The MAV comes up too low to reach the Hermes spaceship. Vogel constructs a quickly made sugar and oxygen explosive to blow the front hatch and cause escaping air to slow the huge ship down so they can match speeds and still get to Watney. Lewis herself decides to use the EVA MMA suit with a tether to reach Watney, but she can't get close enough. Watney punctures the palm of his glove to propel himself towards Lewis with the escaping air jet. He has very little control, so he misses her. However, he runs into the tether, which his momentum causes to wind around himself and Lewis, and the crew is able to reel them in. Lewis announces to NASA that they have Watney, and people all over the world cheer. The crew hugs Watney and jokes about the stench resulting from his lack of showering for many months. Back on Earth about 1 year later, Watney begins day one as an instructor to aspiring astronauts. He tells them of his struggle on Mars, confirming that he did in fact grow food using his own excrement, and humorously says he doesn't want to discuss that aspect of the mission again. He tells them that if things should go south for them, they can either accept their fate or start solving problems, because that's how you survive, by overcoming one problem after another. During the closing credits, we see the characters years later as they watch the launch of Ares 5, of which Martinez is the commander. Kapoor, Montrose, Park, and Sanders watch from NASA along with Guo Ming and Zhu Tao. Henderson is retired and golfing with his son. Lewis watches at home with her husband, while Vogel is at home with his family. Beck and Johansson have gotten married and are watching from the hospital with their new baby. Thank you for watching movie quotes and recaps. And for more videos, Please hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell.